Good afternoon, everybody, and hello to everybody on the stage, panelists. We're going to be starting the session today. Very, very interesting session. Almost, it's a question which is really the elephant in the room. You know, is sustainable travel and tourism profitable? But let's first start by thanking the Resilience Council for organizing this important session. The Global Travel and Tourism Resilience Council is an incubator of critical concepts to facilitate partnerships and collaborations between the public and private sectors. And the Resilience Council has partnered with ATM to provide examples of thought leadership on travel and tourism. So without further ado, I'm going to jump into the topic. It's a very interesting, very exciting topic. And before I move to the panelists, I'm going to just share some thoughts of mine. Sustainable travel and tourism is a very important aspect. It's a very important criteria for the world to move towards net zero emissions. There are a lot of innovations, technological innovations, which are coming up in the field. There's a lot of funding for sustainable travel and tourism, which is coming into the field as well. Let's look at Dubai. We have all gathered here for this important conference on travel and tourism. And Dubai faces an existential challenge of balancing its thriving tourism industry with its race to attract people to live here, to move here, and to live here, and as well as its commitments to its net zero emissions. This is the year of sustainability in the UAE, in fact. Now, all these three, travel and tourism for Dubai, the race to attract the very best from the world to live over here, and its net zero ambitions, all three are the lifelines of the city. And if this is not balanced effectively, it can be counterproductive. So the attractions and the experiences offered by this city make it an aspirational destination for tourists from all over the world. And by 2027, just connecting it to the profitability part, by 2027, it is estimated that travel and tourism industry in Dubai will grow further by 5% and will result in a market volume of 1,569 million US dollars. And as UAE brings more than 30 million tourists, supports 770,000 jobs. Anywhere in the world, this is just a case of Dubai, and I thought it was apt to bring up Dubai. We are all gathered over here. But anywhere in the world, a well-planned and responsible approach to tourism is the way to go. Sustainability these days is a buzzword. I've been working in this field for the last 9 years now, and it's a buzzword now, but in its essence, it refers to responsibility. So how do you do things as an individual, as an organization, as an industry, as a country, in a responsible way? So in the year of sustainability in the UAE, it is indispensable to ensure that this city's travel and tourism that already caters to 10% of the Emirates' GDP is growing sustainably and profitably. This is important to all other parts of the world as well. So in today's panel, this is what we're going to do. We're going to be looking at a few different models of how sustainable travel and tourism can be profitable. I'm going to introduce my amazing panelists, Zina Ben Sheikh. She's the Managing Director, EMEA of Intrepid Travel, the travel industry's largest B Corp. Intrepid is a global small group adventure travel company, and the company offers more than 1,100 escorted tours worldwide. Jared Harkham, he's the Managing Director in ICF's Aviation, Travel and Tourism Consulting Group, who's based in New York. He's flown in from New York, landed 2 a.m. this morning. He's also a former senior airline planner, so he has really seen the aviation sector from 360 degrees. And aviation is such an important driver for making travel and tourism sustainable. His client work includes sustainability in the economic and social contexts with airlines, airports, and DMOs. Welcome, Jared. Christian Delhomme. He's the Secretary General of A World for Travel, A World for Travel is the first international event which works on the post-COVID recovery and the development of travel and tourism activities, believing that the sustainable transformation of tourism is a prerequisite for its recovery. So I'm really looking forward to some interesting conversations with you, Christian. Welcome. Carlos Sendra has flown in from Spain. He's the partner and chief marketing officer at Mabrion Technologies, which is a Spanish travel intelligence company that provides services to destinations and companies in more than 40 countries. So some very interesting data-related insights will be coming in from Mabrion and more. Mabrion combines the state of the big data technology with AI, with a wide range of travel data sources, integrations, and an experienced team in tourism to help companies to make more efficient and sustainable travel decisions. Great. Having said that, an opening question to all my panelists. What does a profitable, sustainable travel and tourism business look like? Zina.
Sure. Can I check that you can hear me? Is it clear enough? Good. All right. So I guess I'll start with the history of Intrepid, because we've been doing responsible travel or sustainable travel for 33 years now. At that time, it wasn't a buzzword. It wasn't a concept. It wasn't something people were talking about. But it was pretty much a form of travel that was created by our two original co-founders that has as aim to provide an economic benefit to the communities and the destinations that we support. So our co-founders came up with the idea that there should be a form of travel that was truly immersive, respectful, that was having a positive impact on those populations and destinations. And that's how the whole concept of Intrepid started. And since then, we've been through many, many years of profitable business. And before sustainability became a buzzword, it was all what we were doing. It was creating a form of travel that was creating shared value for everyone, not just our shareholders, but the communities, our suppliers, our customers, the environment that we were using as our product in a way, because the planet is what we're showing to the people that come and travel with us. And so the profit has always been seen for us as an output, not a goal. It's an important output, although we've got a purpose beyond making profits. So we need to make a profit because we reinvest that profit into growing our business, but that's not what we're chasing and what we're looking at as a sustainable travel company.
I think, Zainab, you said something very important, that it's creating stakeholder value beyond shareholder value, which in a sense is what a sustainable business really does.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Jared.
Now, is this working?
This is working great.
Okay. Thanks for that question. I think I'll answer a little bit from the point of view of airlines rather than the broader scope. And I think, obviously, as everybody says, it's the sustainable company needs to be financially sustainable, so profit is a motive. And even in countries where flag airlines are still owned by the government, most governments don't have a huge tolerance for big losses anymore. So even in that environment, profitability is key, and that profitability may be enabled a little bit by tax breaks and other things to encourage compliance with the green agenda, but in large part, that's important. The other thing that, at least on the airline side, we see is that the program has to be sustainability of whatever type needs to be implementable. It needs to be not a huge struggle. And this way, what I've seen is that airlines that work with their industry associations, be it IATA or ALTA in Latin America or AFRA, taking advantage of what's already known and other companies' experiences is a great way to save time and money and get where they want to go. And finally, also on the airline side, several of the panels that I was sitting through earlier mentioned the phenomenon of flight shaming, and really trying to make flying a dirty activity. So I think, and airlines feel kind of unjustifiably attacked by that because the emissions percent as a percent of global total for air travel is not as big as the people might make out. So I think airlines are always very anxious to get credit for things they do without appearing to greenwash, which is the previous panel. So getting some good credit and recognition for what they're doing is part of what actually drives these companies even more to do that.
Very interesting. Thank you, Jared. Christian.
Let's say profitable and sustainable, it's easy to say, but it's difficult to achieve. Sustainability requires invest by meeting the customer's requirement, and the business is upgraded, and we have to consider that this upgrade is something that is changing a lot of things. Besides, a sustainable business must be more efficient, costly speaking. So if we can meet the cost effectiveness with the invest, but with sizing a new business model, it will be feasible. And the sustainable transformation so allows these new business models, these new production schemes, these new products we need to produce, and at the end, a new pricing policy.
Yeah.
I want to emphasize on one topic. A sustainable business model is definitely not a low-cost model. Not at all. Particularly the salaries and the working conditions must increase to be decent enough to acquire skilled employees. And skilled employees, it's the absolute requirement for a sustainable business shift and even to attract them back.
Yeah. I'm going to come back to you on the business models for sustainable business. Thank you. Please, Carlos.
Well, in my case, you hear me? In my case, focusing on a destination perspective, where we are actually experts, we always define sustainable destination as the one that has achieved a balance in between 4 key factors. The first is the visitor's experience. The second, just going briefly, the second is the residents' well-being. The third is the environmental preservation or even regeneration. And the fourth is the profitability of the private sector. We have been saying this for the last 2 years already, because the balance between those 4 factors are key in order to have a living and healthy and sustainable tourism sector. But living, because if it's not profitable, it's going to be over, obviously. So it's a matter of balance.
Exactly why this panel is put together. If it's not profitable, then it doesn't make sense. Thank you. Christian, I want to come back to you on your comment about the business model. We have new business models and we have old business models in travel and industry. It's such an age-old, very, very old industry. So we have new models and we have very old models. Do new travel and tourism business models, which have sustainability embedded within itself, within its business model, a little bit like what Intrabit had, do these business models have it easier rather than as compared to some of the older travel and tourism companies, some of the aviation companies, who need to retrofit sustainability within itself?
That's a major challenge, in fact. A new company can build everything from scratch. So it's easier, and they do not lose any money to do it. A traditional one needs to face the transition costs, and this can be very costly. And that's the real problem, because it requires new skills, and you have the old ones. It requires and demand a huge managerial effort, and you have not changed your management. So what about when you have not changed your management, you have the cost to increase. At the end, your business model is collapsing. And what was the old business model? What we have to know. We wanted to cut costs, to lower prices, increase volume with very tiny margins. And at the end, when you have a crisis, what about? So I think that we could refer to Schumpeter's theory. You know Schumpeter's, who was an economist. He says that the new models, the new businesses, are just replacing the old ones. But it doesn't work over. It's more complicated. In fact, it doesn't work like this. So I think there is two ways for traditional businesses to face this problem. The first one is to reinvest and to plan the transition. Because if you want to do everything at once, it won't be profitable. Or the other one, and the airline industry is doing so, is to develop a new business in parallel to the old one, and to let the old one die or diminish or transform themselves in more luxury or another thing. But it cannot be the same business model with the same schemes. So it is very challenging.
So very challenging for traditional travel and tourism businesses. And two little nuggets of wisdom from Christian: reinvest and plan the transition. And second is build a new business which runs parallel. Great. I'm going to just dive a little bit deeper into the traditional business models. And I'll go to Jared, because you've been a strategic planner for 2 airlines and a consultant to many organizations in the sector. Can you provide us with 3 ways or 3 examples in which airline companies, which are traditional, how have they moved to sustainable business models / sustainable technologies?
One of the things that may be of interest, or maybe people don't recall, is that airlines, in a way, have started this process some decades ago. You know, when the jet aircraft first came along, the efficiency of those engines and those aircraft was very poor. So, you know, it was okay when oil was very cheap, but as oil prices increased, made this completely economically unsustainable for the airline industry. So there was all kinds of pressure on the engine manufacturers and the aircraft manufacturers to create better efficiency. So now, you know, versus 30, 40 years ago, the efficiency of a jet engine is just, you know, multitudes and multitudes more efficient. And the airlines really started this. Now, when they did, it was more for economic reasons than for necessarily environmental sustainability, but it happened. So there is some kind of a tradition in the industry to do that. So, you know, that's an important one. And I think the other thing is just innovation in general. You know, the airlines have a long history of working with aircraft manufacturers to develop quieter aircraft. Now that's been pushed more by governments and communities, and, you know, than perhaps, you know, for economic reasons.
Yes.
But nevertheless, that, you know, moving toward quieter and more efficient aircraft has been part of the aviation culture for a long time. You know, one of the things, I wouldn't call it greenwashing, I would call it was good intent, but not necessarily fixing the problem, was some years ago, airlines offered the ability to plant a tree somewhere if you bought a ticket and you wanted to. So, you know, that, I think that's gone by the wayside as people focus more on serious issues like, you know, even more sustainable fuels and that sort of thing. I mean, the fuel issue for airlines is really the main one. And I don't know if we have a second, I'll talk a little about
I'll come back to
the fuel issue. So SAF, Sustainable Aviation Fuel, is in the news all the time now, and many of you have seen it. And it's a great tool. It's a great step in the right direction. But there's some things to know about it. You know, despite the fact that many airlines and airports make announcements about millions of gallons of SAF that they're agreeing to produce and use, the percentage of industry need being handled by what can be produced now, in 2019 it was 0.5%. For 2025 we're looking at maybe 5% if we get there. So there's an awful long way to go. The goal is that by 2050 to have half of the airline of the need come from SAF. But this means sort of an 8,000-fold increase in manufacturing capability is needed between now and then. So that's a lot to do. There are a couple of other pieces of that story. You know, one report was released recently that talked about the fact that the very manufacturing of SAF can produce contaminants and pollution to the atmosphere that could offset a good part of the good work of using SAF on your aircraft. So this is another piece of the formula, has to be taken into account as SAF is developed. Another thing is that the geography of where SAF is produced now or has been announced to be produced. 70% of this is North America. Another 25% approximately is Europe and the UK. That leaves, you know, very little anywhere else in the world.
Yes.
And it's not a product that's, you know,
Yes.
you want to move around the planet a lot because it will cause more problem. So, you know, SAF is good, but there are a whole bunch of things there. And let me just go on to the part two is the other options. And there, you know, probably better solutions are things like hydrogen fuel. That's a little bit longer in the future, but there are aircraft and firms planning to do scheduled use, commercial use in 2035. But there are companies right now, there's one called Universal Hydrogen, another one is something Avia, and they are actually flying ATR-sized aircraft now using hydrogen aircraft, and that group has already over 250 orders for these aircraft from 16 different operators. So there's a lot of money and sort of faith going into the hydrogen piece. Electric is also another thing, and airlines are already starting to use electric and eVTOL all over the world. But producing the electricity for these purposes is another issue, much like producing the SAF. It has to be produced cleanly. So, you know, there are many, many hopeful things along the way, but SAF is not the miracle cure. You know, it gets a lot of attention because of the big numbers, but in terms of percent, there's still a long way to go to make a meaningful difference.
Wow. I think the airline industry is a tremendous example of how a traditional industry is moving towards leveraging technology besides planting trees to becoming sustainable. And I wanted to pick on what you said in the first half of your answer about the economic reasons to be really the push for the airline industry to move towards energy efficiency. And that links back to, Carlos, your point about where you said that if it's not profitable, it's, you know, it's not worth it. You deal with data. And what would be the indicators, the data indicators, which would define sustainability and profitability for the travel and tourism industry? And I know you have a slide on that as well, so it might be a good time to. Yes, great. All right.
Thank you. Well, I'm going to start saying that the most of the destination managers are completely lost among a universe of different KPIs, different possibilities to measure without a framework, without a general standard, right? And another thing to point out is measuring sustainability is really, really difficult because it's too wide and has a lot of effects in different parts of the economy and the life itself. But knowing that, what we try to do is create a standard for destinations the more scalable and relatable way based on global data sources in order to lay the foundations of start measuring things, right? And this is not exhaustive and this is not perfect, but what we're trying to do is just bring in some tools to our destinations, our clients, in order to start doing things, right? Especially at the areas where they do actually make decisions and can make things happening and changing, right? What we created with more than 30 global sources, we created a very simple data set of KPIs, 7 different KPIs, in order to measure these kind of things, right? Those are the KPIs that I'm displaying now. And just moving forward, all of them quickly. The first is the distribution of the tourism incomes. This is related to how profitable, how profitable is the tourism for the local economies. So how much of the incomes of the tourism is going to the local economies, because it has a direct effect on the well-being of the resident, and obviously with the satisfaction with the sector, right? On the second part, we have the carbon footprint, which besides from measuring the carbon footprint that the visitors are generating to visit a destination, what we do is creating an indicator, an efficiency indicator that relates the carbon footprint, the average carbon footprint that visitor is generating to get to a destination versus their patterns of spending during their stay, and how these spending patterns are affecting the local economies. And so we relate both things in order to have an efficiency ratio to identify what are the target markets that may be more efficient for the destination regarding those two things. The next one is the concentration offer indicator. Here, what we do is helping destinations to better manage the pressure, the human pressure in certain zones or times of the year, in order to better manage the discomfort that the peaks of human pressure can generate to the resident, but also to the visitor, and also helps destination to better manage the accommodation offer in order to avoid, and this is related again to the profitability, to avoid the high competence on prices, right? The fourth is and this is related to profitability, but could be also related to the greenwashing, which is something present on the conversation, right? The tourism sustainability perception wants to help destinations to really track what is the image that they are projecting to their source markets in order to know how sustainable they perceive a destination. And this is about knowing if they are communicating well what they are doing for the destination, since this is have a direct link with the demand nowadays, right? And the three next indicators are all related to the sustainability in a more structural way for a destination, and all of them has to do with the balance again, right? The dependence on markets of origin, dependence on specific products, tourist products, and specific seasons, obviously, has a lot to do with the stability of the sector, and making those progresses let the destinations have a more stable and normally more diversified tourism proposal, which also benefits the companies and also the residents. If you know a little more, you can just scan this QR, and you will see more about these kind of indicators and reports.
This is super useful. Thank you so much. Zina, I have a question for you on indicators, but before that, I can't help but asking you that in November 2022, Intrepid had $6 million $6 million of sales in one day. That was your biggest single day sales ever. How did you do it? What happened?
It was a big surprise, to be honest.
$6 million in a day.
leading to that day, we had a few days of record growth. So we
Yes.
went from 3 million to 4 million and every day we were internally asking ourselves
Yes.
what was going on. So that was incredible achievement.
Yes.
I guess there's a few things. The first I'd say is the years leading to the pandemic were record years of growth for us, and I'm talking revenue and
Yes.
bottom line. I'm not talking just, because we're not a startup. We're less traditional than an airline, but we are 33 years business. So I consider ourselves as a mature business, not necessarily a startup. So leading to the pandemic, we were really doing great, and that's because the markets were coming toward us. On one side, people want more experiential travel in
Yes.
general. So people want to get immersed. They want to experience the local culture, the local destinations. And this is what we offer. That's
Yes.
what's in our DNA. And on the other side, people became more and more conscious the carbon footprint of sustainability. As you said, it was becoming a buzzword. So those years leading to the pandemic made our product and our company very attractive to people.
Yes.
And the majority of customers that were coming on Intrepid trips were new customers.
Yes.
In that sense.
Yes.
So we started the pandemic on a very good position. Our balance sheet was very positive. So that helped a lot to go through these 2.5 years of very challenging times without having to cut a lot of costs, without having to reduce the workforce significantly. And we could really keep the business running. So when business or travel comes back, we were really well positioned to take on that pent-up demand.
Yes.
So what happened in November literally is this combination of things, being strong financially, having the right product for the right trends that were happening in the markets, and never stopping, our marketing, our communication
Yes.
efforts, so we could really leverage that return of travel and achieve these type of results. So that was extremely positive indeed.
Amazing, Zina. I think that's a great example and a very encouraging example for sustainable business models. Thank you for sharing that. And I wanted to dovetail that into what Carlos was sharing about indicators to define sustainability for profitability and sustainability for the travel and tourism industry. What would be the drivers for sustainable travel and tourism? Why should a company move towards, in the travel and tourism industry, move towards sustainability? Where is the money coming from? Where are the funds coming from? In your case, yes, you said you didn't stop the communications, didn't stop the marketing. It is clearly a business model. But besides that, are there investors coming in? Are there grants? What's going on?
Absolutely.
What are the drivers in
Absolutely. I think what we're finding is we're less and less niche, and we're becoming more and more interesting for other key stakeholders. So I'll give you a couple of examples. We're now asked by tourism boards, for example, to work with us to grow their destinations. 10 years ago, we were very tiny, very niche. Why would a tourism board come to us and not instead going to a TUI and the likes? And so that's something that we've seen happening more and more, to a point that we're kind of slowing
Yes.
it down because we don't even have the capacity to do all of that. So that partnerships with destinations has become a key driver. Destinations want to be more seen
Yes.
as more sustainable and want to partner with the likes of Intrepid. On the other side, we have more and more demand from development agencies and
Yes.
government agencies to work with us to help them. While they have the money, and there's a lot of money out there,
Yes.
they don't have the skills or the knowledge, both on the ground, to manage their supply chain,
Yes.
to grow, to create capacity building in the supply chain, but also in markets to tell them what people want. So, for example, we, during the pandemic, worked with Bosnia and USAID, more
Yes.
specifically in Bosnia, to create a partnership in a country that's coming post-war, wants to develop tourism, their tourism product. They came to us to help them to develop those products, to create training, to create tools for the supply chain, so they can actually invest in growing product that we believe customer will then want. And
Yes.
this product is live for sale, and it's doing really, really well. So it's an example, but we're doing a lot of that
Yes.
to leverage those funds that are existing.
You're right. Thank you, Zina. Super interesting. I want to move this discussion towards the challenges. I think we've really, talked about business models. What does sustainable businesses look like in travel and tourism? We've looked at some data indicators. We've got some amazing examples from a traditional business as well as a business which has sustainability in its business model. Jared, you spoke about how SASF is just 1%, has a 1% market share, and same for hydrogen as well. So even though the airline industry started off way before many other industries towards sustainability, mostly because they just wanted to be energy efficient. But what's stopping them? Why is it so slow? What are the challenges for the airline industry to really transform?
Well, it isn't so much about the airline industry as the whole ecosystem. You know, the ability to formulate the SAF
Yes.
products took quite some time. It's now really hitting a stride, and airlines are signing up, airports, and you know, you've all seen that in the news. But as I mentioned before, the sort of the cost and the effort to even build the manufacturing facilities for these fuels is
Yes.
time consuming and expensive. There is money, at least in the US, we know, in the, you know, the Biden government,
Yes.
and providing a lot of money for that. So it's happening, maybe slower than any of us would like,
Yeah.
but you know, some of it is science. The research takes a while, and some of it has been the cost of actually producing and selling the fuel. But I wanted to mention this as well. One of our SAF experts in the company talked recently about, you know, the traditional decline in cost of new fuels. I mean, we all saw this with computer chips. You know, every 18 months that declined by blah blah. But you know, also he researched this with other alternative fuel sources, wind power, you know, photovoltaic, and all these. And the curves, you know, are just going down. And in fact, those energy sources are also now at or below the legacy energy source pricing levels, unit pricing levels, and there's no reason to think that SAF won't do that, and that the hydrogen and other sources won't do that. But it's just going to take a little while longer. I mean, there is some alarm that, you know, will we make the goals by the 2050 goals with this glacial pace? But I think that alarm, coupled with the decline in the price of producing and selling these new fuels,
Yes.
build some momentum right
so it's
now.
the costs. It's
Go
the
on.
costs of that whole transition and the ecosystem that you mentioned as well. Thank you, Jared. And I want to connect that to what Christian said about the costs. Your opening statement was that it's expensive, right? And so in an industry which has tight margins, this transition to sustainability for traditional travel and tourism companies, is that a challenge? Is that how do you see that as a challenge? These tight margins and then the costs to move towards sustainability.
Yes, that's effectively the big question.
Yes, big question.
So the whole business is over because of the accumulation of crisis, because and upcoming crisis. So I am afraid that the resilience of the travel and tourism industry now must not rely on the state's generosity, because they have afforded a lot of money to during the pandemic, and it is a one shot.
Yes.
It is a one shot. So the priority is to put the effect of the crisis inside the business models, just to foresee what will happen. We never do that. We never do that. We always want the thing to go on as they are in the fairy world. And the world is not a fairy at all. So the priority is to increase the margins. And there is only one thing. I'm afraid we have to increase the prices for that.
Yeah.
And there are other investments we have not mentioned. We have not mentioned the transformation we have mentioned the transformation of sustainability, but we have not mentioned the transformation for technology. That is very costly. But we have not mentioned the absolute necessity to increase the wages and the working conditions and the attractivity of the employment within the travel and tourism industry that is poor and poor, because we want skilled people back, because these skilled people are going to build the new models and we're missing them.
How about upskilling people? Can you upskill existing workforce to work on transforming and transitioning the company into becoming sustainable? Is that possible?
I think it is. We have to be optimistic
Yeah.
and to keep on being optimistic because the demand is strong. It's very strong. It's still strong now. And it's keeping strong. And the behaviors of the customers are adapting themselves. For instance, we show longer staying. We show selection, a better selection between short, medium, and long haul trips. And why not encouraging them? When I began, it was 40 years ago in the airline industry, we had less price when we were staying longer. And why not? It used to be feasible. It must be feasible. It will encourage the behavior of the customers.
Yeah.
Instead of accumulating the trips
Yes.
with very, very tiny margins. So in another extent, because we need cooperation, you have mentioned cooperation, yes, of course, and to achieve this sustainable business model shift, this cooperation is key, for sure. And the travel and tourism value chain is very fragmented, as we mentioned, and there's answer cannot belong to one part of it. So what must we do? For instance, you mentioned the decarbonation of the trip, but we know that the technology is less accessible for the flights than it is for the ground operations. So why not emphasizing on the ground operations first? Why not emphasizing on the transport for the people from the cities to the airports first? And then we will solve, fortunately, we will solve the flights at the end. So this is an example because nobody is owner of the solution. Nobody is owner of the solution. And that's why I think that if we are not doing this, at the end, the whole share chain will fail. And we have also to be aware of one thing, that when we stay at home and in our city, our footprint is not nothing.
Yes, yes,
So
yes.
we have not to refer only on the footprint of the trip, but on the difference between the footprint of the ongoing life and the footprint of what we can do.
Yes.
And then, as a measurement, not to measure the impact and the footprint on one trip, but on each day of the trip.
Yes.
And you will see that at the end, the footprint of each day of the trip can diminish dramatically. Less trip, longer. I think it's one of the solutions.
Yes, great. Thank you. So I think the panel agrees that sustainable travel and tourism is the necessary path. But what I'm hearing is that costs is a deterrent, and there are some solutions over here. One is that you embed sustainability within the business model itself. You look at technological innovations, but that costs money. Transformation costs money. So increasing the margin for travels, cooperation with others, improving the operations as well, and less trips and longer stays. Zina, I just wanted to come back to you. Did you, at Intrepid, use any of these ways to be profitable? The ways that Carlos mentioned. Any of these, does that ring a bell to you?
Yeah, sure, many of those. And we're also adapting to the trends. And I wanted to jump on a few things.
Yes.
I think one of the reasons why we are where we are, it's because it's been driven by the top.
Yes.
It's not just embedded in the form of travel,
Yes.
but it's co-founders' values and aim is that we are a sustainable travel company. And 10 years ago didn't mean the same thing than 20 years ago, and it doesn't mean the same thing today. So we're constantly challenging ourselves and constantly looking at ways to be better. And we're not perfect by far. But it started, for example, in 2005 by just reviewing if we wanted to know our carbon footprint, which at that time was not very popular or something very important. And back at that time, it took us 5 years to become at least to offer a range of trips that were carbon neutral. And
did it cost you more to do that?
So in a way, it always costs money because
Yeah.
it costs resources. So, for example, in 2005, we hired our first responsible travel manager.
Great,
And that
yeah.
was something
Yes.
at that time.
Yes.
Now we have a full team
Yes.
with a chief purpose officer and
Yes.
a team below. But at that time, it was one FTE, full-time employee, for small business that had
Yeah.
mostly one source market and a few destinations. But what this person helped us to do is to understand our carbon footprint, to be able to measure it, because you can't reduce what you don't know. So be able to reduce then the carbon footprint through different activities, from moving internal flights to public transport to whatever
Yes.
we've done at the time. And then obviously it's a journey. So from there, we went into in 2020 thinking that being carbon neutral is not enough.
Yes.
Offsetting carbon, like planting trees, is not enough anymore. So what is the next step? And that's how we entered our decarbonization plans, and we have now verified science-based targets, but we couldn't do that if we didn't know that that was even a
Yes.
thing. But we've got, as part of our team, a scientist who's a professor and has been able to guide us and to tell us. And so these investments, obviously they are investments, but they are here for the longer term. And making profit as a business in travel especially, but in general, it's a long-term game. It's not, you cannot expect if you do
Yes.
this now, next year you'll be profitable. I don't think that's what we've been
Yes.
through, and we've always accepted that our profitability will be a sustainable one, and it will
Yes.
come step by step. But it builds foundations
Yes.
for the longer term, which
Yes.
is the space we want to be in.
Thank you, Zainab. So I think the key point here is that it is an investment. There are expenses, but you're looking at it for the long term. And I just want to close this piece on challenges with you, Carlos. I think when you're looking at challenges, we're all talking about the costs that are involved, right? So what are the other challenges that you see from the data that you work on for travel and tourism to be sustainable besides the costs? Then what else?
Yeah, I would go for probably a more deep challenges, right? I think I would remark three. One is the short-term thinking.
Yeah.
This is one stopper. The too local approach is the second I would mention, and then the lack of ambition and investments, right? The two first issues are part of the human being.
Yes.
And that's something that we need to realize, and we need to do a brave step forward in order to break that. We all are short-term thinkers, so we need to break that. And the third, the investment, is the proof that we are convinced and we are brave enough and we are putting efforts in terms of investments on that. And I do have some examples of any of those. The short-term thinking is so clear for me because
Yes.
we work for nowadays more than 40 destinations all around the world, and the most of them are still thinking on quantitative metrics and how many visitors I will have this summer, this season, this year, right? Today, just a few are thinking on what can do now to have a different model in 10 years, right? This is happening now. The local approach is also obvious. We are based in Europe, and we are really worried now, especially in Spain. Spain now is 35 degrees.
Yes.
It's amazing, right? Really warm. The climate change, the global warming, this is something that worries a lot, but we feel like something gradual, right? But in the meantime, in the Caribbean, in South Asia, those changes are happening in a different way. I mean, more aggressively and affecting directly not only the tourism but the living on those parts. I saw last week a really interesting report from Deloitte that says if we can't manage to maintain the temperature, the global warming, and it climbs up to 3 degrees in average globally, by 2070, we're going to have 178 trillion of economic losses globally, right? That's a lot.
Yeah.
Okay, but what really took my attention was 54% of that losses will be held by South Asia. So more than the half, it's only localized in one region, right? And Europe is 6% of that losses, right? So we need to keep mind global. And the third is the lack of ambition in terms of investments. Jared was saying about the challenges about the sustainable aviation fuels, etc. Last week, the European Commission just made an announcement about an agreement that they're going to push the companies to increase the use of the sustainable fuels up to 2% for 2025. 2%. I mean, is this ambitious enough? I know there are challenges, but maybe it's a matter of investments, especially because what I've seen also in a really interesting report from consultancies that, and I don't know if I'm right, Jared, you can correct me, the 55% of the carbon footprint in the travel industry is coming from the aviation, right? So if we don't manage to change that quick, we are lost. I mean, we are not going anywhere.
Thank you. And I think it's a wonderful note to close the discussion because the mindset change, right? So that's in my practice also, I see this is actually the most difficult thing, changing the mindsets, getting people to think about the long term, which some businesses have done. They're thinking about the long term. Thank you. Before we get into the questions, the Q&A with the audience, one last closing question to all the panelists here. What would be one clear way in which travel businesses can be sustainable and profitable? One clear way to share. Let's be snappy with this, and we can start with you, Zina.
I think I've said it already, but the topic needs to be a broad level.
Yes.
It needs to be driven from the top.
Driven from the top, yes.
Because that's what's going to make everyone else doing the work. If it's not supported by the investors, the shareholders, it won't get far away. So we need the buy-in
Driven from the top.
Yeah.
Great. Jared.
I would say that there needs to be very strong leadership. And in some cases, we have our airline industry associations, airport associations, government, but there's got to be an alignment and leadership to push it through, and maybe not just a little piecemeal, 2% here. You know.
Leadership. Great. Carlos. Christian, please.
I should say, create value for your customer first. Do not only sell prices, invest in the human factor. So less trip, longer staying, more experiences. Build your product around your quality and service targets, and not provide mechanical services around your low cost.
Thank you.
Your low cost. In one sentence, make travel magic again.
Thank you. Thank you, Christian. Carlos.
I would say a key point is the education. Education, not only for travelers, but only for the local hosting communities. As long as we educate to live in a sustainable way, when we travel, we behave the same.
Yes.
If we manage to have an educated population in this side, and then we act on the pain points on the travel industry in terms of carbon, like the transport and the accommodation, then we will move forward.
Yes, education, absolutely. Thank you. Thank you everyone. We have a few last minutes to take questions from the audience. Any questions from the audience? Yes, the gentleman over here. Please go ahead. Can someone give him the mic, please? You can introduce yourself, and if the question is directed to any of the panelists, please.
Thank you very much. My name is Dia. I'm the executive manager of Violet Hotel Mecca, Mecca Al Mukarrama. We have an experience last 2 months is regarding the Umrah price. I saw Mr. Kermis talk about the price.
Yes.
What happened last month in Ramadan? Ramadan always, it's a season, big season for us. What's going on last Ramadan? That all the hotel increased the price, and unfortunately the occupancy go down because of the price. And normally we have our guests from Saudi Arabia, from Emirates, from Oman. Most of these guests, local guests, are removed this Umrah. They don't come to the Umrah. Normally they come every year. For me, in my hotel, we have a regular guest every year. They stay all the months for Umrah.
Yes.
Last year, unfortunately, and this year, the people who come just come for 2 nights or 3 nights. Normally, they come for the months. They stay months.
Yes.
So we have to find solution for the price in all the hotel. The hotel who's economy hotel? This is the only hotel has good occupancy. The VIP hotel, the 5-star hotel, 4-star hotel, unfortunately, the occupancy go down.
Okay.
They didn't get profit.
And what's
so
the
what
question?
we have to do for the price?
What can you do for the price?
Yeah.
Christian, you want to take that? Thank you.
If you want to maximize your revenue, you have 2 ways.
Please.
To increase the volume, to increase the unit price, the unit revenue per trip or per traveler, let's say. Why diminishing the price when you have a lot of room to sell? Maybe you can keep on. In my country, I am also a DMO in the Pyrenees in France. So it's elected as town councillor in charge of tourism. And I was struck once when one hotel offered for 1 week in France, for 1 week, 100 euros only for 1 week. Not per day, for 1 week. I think it's preferable to close and to increase the prices when the demand is higher. So it was also the case, because we have to change our mind. We are pampered to lower the prices, and then we lower the cost. And at the end, we lower the cost even when the customer is able and can pay for a better experiences. So invest on the experiences instead of investing in the prices.
Thank you, Christian. Those were famous
Thank you very much.
last words of the panel. We have exhausted our time. If I didn't see any other hands risen, there are 2 more. Can I take these 2 questions? No? Do you want to speak with the speakers right after the conference? Is that okay? Yeah? Is that okay? But I would like to thank everybody on the panel. It's been an amazing panel, very, very insightful. And some key takeaways here is that what's needed is the leadership from the top. Yes, investment is required, but then you have to think long term. Education and awareness is extremely important, but ultimately, sustainable travel and tourism is the only way to go. That is where all industries are moving. So the sooner that this industry moves on to the path, the better it is. But thank you so much, everybody, and apologies for not, having time for the questions. Please come over and thank you. Thank you so much. And thank you very much to the Resilience Council as well for organizing this, the Dubai World Trade Center and ATM. Thank you.